I wanted to be the same person behind the mic, at church, at the store, in my marriage, with you in the podcast. I want to be consistently myself no matter what I'm doing. And it was that self-reflection of, I was hiding behind the mask of Russell. That wasn't who I really was. Who do I really want to be?
Welcome to the Crucible Project Podcast. The Crucible Project is a nonprofit organization committed to creating a world of men and women who live with integrity, grace, and courage, helping them to fulfill their God-given purpose. This podcast will discuss important and sometimes difficult topics while delivering practical life applications with men and women who are currently practicing this work. We are igniting Christ-like change in men and women through experiences of radical honesty and grace.
This is Jay Mountjoy. I'm here with a very special guest. Robb, would you please introduce yourself to everyone?
My name is Robb Paolasso. Is that all you want to hear?
I was like, I know Robb. And then I looked at your last name and I was like, I'm going to flub that. So thank you. Paolasso. So it's a silent O. We don't need to get into it.
Yeah, it's a difficult last name, but I do enjoy it. Yeah.
I enjoy it so much that you're here, that you're taking the time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much again for being here.
Oh, no problem.
So yeah, we'll start with a little bit more intro. I'm going to call you out, put you on the spot. You were one of the originals who jumped in with this, showed me a bunch of ropes. We spent a bunch of time working on this, and here it is. Where are you at with working with the Crucible podcast now?
I've been with Crucible since April of 2016. That's when I did my initial weekend. And then for me, I did my initial weekend in Texas, and I live in Colorado. That was my way of like, I don't want to run into people I know. And by doing it in Texas, and then I just started staffing like crazy in Colorado, getting to know a lot of the Crucible men here.
Your first weekend, there's something going on in your life where you're like, okay, I hear about the weekend. I better go to Texas to do this. So how do you hear about the weekend? How's it presented to you?
It was definitely presented to me at church time and time again. It was one of those voices I heard in the back of my head that I would like to ignore because I knew it was something I needed to do. And then I had a friend of mine who was going to go on a weekend in January to Como, and he had found out that one of his really close friends was staffing that weekend. And he came to me at church and said, listen, if this weekend is intense as I think it is, I don't want to go on this weekend and reveal anything around this man. So I got 3 or 4 weekends I can go to either like Chicago or Texas, and I forget the other state, and you and I road trip or whatever, and we'll just get out of here and go together. Are you open to that idea? And I was like, yeah, I should probably go as well. I've got some stuff going on in my life. And I legitimately at the time, the wife and I were going to church, but not really getting fed, not really enjoying it, but we were staffing in kids ministry and really enjoying that. But at the same time, looking at other churches to maybe find a different connection. But we also had a couple that we consider mentors and really close friends to us that we were attending church with that we just didn't want to step away from because we really love that relationship. So I decided to be selfish and go, let's go to Texas, April. And the reason why I call it selfish is because my son at the time was stationed in Texas. He was in the military. That gave me a free weekend to go visit him. So in April, we road tripped to Texas, and we talked to another friend into coming, and he flew down. We all met up, and that's how it started.
There's this interesting thing when I'll, speak for myself. I was thinking about, is there going to be up on this weekend? I know it's going to be, quote unquote, intense. It's going to challenge. Is there anyone I'm going to be up there? No, I'll probably be okay if there is. It was very helpful for me for where I was that I didn't know anybody on my weekend. And I felt very anonymous and very able to stay secure, stay safe, and move through the weekend that way. One of the things I'm hearing is like, okay, I don't want to do this in Colorado. I might run into people, but you also have the relationships. And I would say I didn't really have the relationships where I would say to another man, hey, I want you by my side in this thing that I know is going to be difficult enough that I want to get out of town also to see your son and double up that way. That's an interesting space for me. And having interviewed a bunch of men who want to go down to a weekend that, tends to be the, hey, my life's already a train wreck. Someone I respect kind of invited me, a mentor type thing. And then, where you have enough self-awareness to be like, doing this, but maybe I'm not getting as much as I want to, but I have some friends, but I want to change that relationship. But I know there's stuff in my life that I want to go down and jump into. And so I am wondering, as you land into that weekend, does it stay the same? I want to work on this, or is there a pretty quick shift as you get into the actual content of the weekend?
I think the greatest part for me getting into the weekend was the fact that we chose to road trip from Denver to Texas to Houston.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and that was an overnight stay, a culture shock And I only say from a person that drives with Colorado license plates into Texas, you will get pulled over at least once. Nothing against Texas. They just don't like our license plates. But
Let me just say, you don't mess with Texas. So it might
yeah,
not be the license plate. It might be you
yeah,
messing with Texas, and don't do it.
exactly.
Yeah.
The point I want to make is that though my friend and I, we spent a lot of time chatting, and he knew a little bit about my story, and I got to share a little bit more deeper of, oh, this is what's going on in my life because we got some time to talk. And he vomited all over me, everything that's been going
Oh,
on.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
which was awesome for me because we really connected and we really got to talk about his situation, what was going on. And what that told me is both him and I, we were ready. And not only that, we needed this weekend. And I like to do road trips right before emotional events. My father had passed away, but he was in Michigan when he passed away. We were in Colorado. So I scooped up some of my siblings and said, we're going to go road trip and make it to his funeral. That was a good bonding emotional experience to and from. I would rate that as the same as driving to a Crucible weekend. It was a very good bonding experience, getting me prepared for the weekend.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if there was a specific moment for you or challenge, right? We don't talk about content of the weekend, but was there one or were there more than one?
The challenge for me, I think, might be obvious in just what I was saying before I even go up there. I was too afraid to go by myself, so I needed a friend to go with, but I also didn't want to be around anyone else that knew me. And I think what I'm not stating is I was pretty close to a lot of the people at the church I attended at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I had recently gone through a very church-involved divorce. And then I was in a relationship that a lot of people within the church disagreed with. And so I felt like there was a lot of story and gossip about me. And I just really wanted to avoid any of that type of negativity into a weekend where I wanted to grow. And so I felt like the only way I could do that is by going to Texas with a man that I felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I got that. But at the same time, I also found two other men that were like, I also do not want to do a weekend in Colorado. I too am going to go to Texas to get away from the people in Colorado. There was a good core group of guys from Colorado that went to Texas to avoid Colorado guys for whatever their own reasons were. We all had our own reasons. And it was nice to experience the weekend with all of those guys. They had grouped us all together, and that was great.
I have a question for you, and this would be my own story, that one of the things that the weekend gives is a new identity in God. Of course, we have to have an identity, and I was, brought up in the church, went to a Christian school, flooded with a lot of Christianity, and along the way, my identity in Christ was harmful. It somehow got bent the other way. So as I'm just hearing your story of being in that environment, being in the church, feeling the stories going on from the church about the divorce, about the wife that you currently had, and the identity seems like it wasn't all positive, and that's hard enough or hurtful enough. Well, who is Robb if he doesn't have a great marriage and a great wife and everything isn't perfect?
Robb at that time was and still, I can't say that I'm fully there yet, but I'm still working on this. I am such a people pleaser that if I feel like there's something I want to bring up to you that might cause an argument between you and I'd just rather not bring it up so we don't have that argument. But I'm still slowly learning that there's ways to do that, because my heart of hearts is to come with an argument in a clean fashion, but the way I word it always comes out of judgment. But going into that weekend taught me some language to come back with more receptive and I hear yous. And I'm not perfect at this yet. I have coaching calls still. I'm in a 2-year group right now. I don't know if we talked about that yet, but the coaching call piece has been really huge to me. Of like, I've had a recent arguments with wife even as of this past month has been hard. And I'm like, I can't take back the negative and mean things I said. It comes out of a place of love that I'm like, I didn't want to call you this name because I was coming from judgment, but I didn't hear what you were saying. And I'm still struggling with not hearing what you're saying, but I want to hear what my wife is telling me. I am really struggling still to this day to hear people and what they are telling me in their argument. And a lot of times when they tell me, I'm mad at you or I'm upset at something, I automatically come back with judgment, like, well, you're being needy or you're being too demanding or you're telling me I'm not doing enough. And then, so that's what I hear a lot of the times. And so instead of saying you're being needy or I think you're being judgmental, I'm going, well, I'm making up the story,
Yep. Yep.
that you're coming from a place of love and that you're asking me for something that you want. It's just a process for me to identify that. And it's been hard for me to identify that when it's heated. There's one thing that I've really learned that I love that I got from the weekend and still doing this work, like in a 2-year group and in a soul group and all like staffing and stuff. There's something about stepping outside of the problem or just changing your position you're in a room. The wife and I were in an argument, and I felt that during the argument that she felt that I was being overwhelming, or maybe it was like I'm 6 foot tall and she's like 5'4". So I felt like maybe I was more menacing. That might be the right word.
Okay.
So I chose to sit down while she was standing up to allow her to feel safe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought of things like that if it wasn't for this type of work. And it's a long way of saying this work has helped me get there, and I'm still working on it.
Well, and I, reminded that love is not a victory march, right?
Right.
There are the cold and the broken hallelujahs of the I need God in this space. And I can absolutely resonate with the I am not perfect. And there are things that I am working with that I would never have, maybe ever in my life, gotten to see if I hadn't gone to a weekend. So while I did have a big positive energy boost coming out of the weekend, I definitely wasn't fixed. And that's one of the stories that I have moving on, is coming across communities or beliefs or different spiritual journeys where they're like, I claimed victory over that in my life. And I'm like, I would love to have that. And maybe I have had that in some areas of my life, but the deepest things that I've identified, it's a need for grace.
No doubt. Yeah.
For sure. Coming out of the weekend, that's already one thing to have identified. 2016. So that's just hit 8 years, right? Am I doing that right?
Yeah.
Coming out of the weekend, as we've mentioned on the podcast, there are some options I think was crucial for me to continue. That my quick anecdote was like, this was awesome coming out of this weekend. Like, that's my mindset. I just fixed so many things. I just had victory over so many things. How awesome am I going to be in 2 years? Jumping into this 2-year program, I won't have any problems. Right?
Sorry.
Totally. You're in it and know it. And I got out of my 2-year group in 2018. And right near the end was kind of this I've just identified that I carry a lot of fear. And it's almost like if someone had tried to tell me that I was a fish and I was swimming in water, I'd be like, what's water? And it was like, no, you carry a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, just a lot of energy in your nervous system. And that's why a lot of these things come out this way. That took me 2 years to get my head around, to be able to square up, to be able to see, and to start the journey of healing, continuing to heal. And, the Crucible work, the weekend work, getting certified to lead groups, training myself, and now, continuing my own work and therapy of just getting to a point of being like, oh, wow, here's professional help in addition to all the other things that I'm doing. And as we say, the journey continues.
So, definitely. I think that's the perfect line too, because I tell guys a lot that I feel like the initial weekend is you just had a heart attack, you hit the hospital, they get the paddles together, they hit it on your chest, the defibrillator, and boom, clear. You're back to a living state. You've done wrong. Some changes you need to make. Now go forth and work on that. I recently, we haven't talked about this, but I had a hospital stay that scared the living heck out of me. I've got some damages that have been caused to my intestines due to my poor eating habits and things like that through the years that I tried to fix with diet and exercise. And then finally, I had to have a hospital stay to go, I have to eat healthy now, or else it's going to hurt really bad again. So going on the weekend, they're like, bam, you have to do things better, or your life is still going to be murky, uncomfortable, not full of joy or peace or contentment. So get the paddles clear. Are you willing now to put in the work? And for me, it was like, I need more of this. I need to staff weekends. I need to do the second level work. I couldn't financially commit to the 2-year group at the time. And I'm excited to say I'm in a 2-year group now. And it's been fun for me to get connected with a new range of guys. And it's a whole new energy because a lot of the guys that are my 2-year group are like, they had just completed their initial weekend. And this is a whole new energy for them. And they're staffing for the first time. And that gives me energy. And watching other men do their work it gets me super excited. When we do some of the processes in group, I just get excited because I'm like, I'm seeing a man do his work. And then I also get scared because then I'm like, well, shoot, I know I need to do this process today. I don't want to, but let's go. And while I'm not where I want to be, I'm better than the guy I was 2016.
Amen to that. So having done at least some of the second level weekends, and for those who are learning more, there are additional weekends to go to support men, help them continue to grow. It is mission and purpose, weekend on sexuality, and then 2 weekends on leadership. How many of those have you gone to?
I've done recently sexuality,
Okay.
and then I did mission and purpose in 2018, which I got to say that one, the reason why I'm excited because I just recently staffed a mission and purpose for the first time. I've never staffed a second level weekend, and I forgot how impactful that weekend was for me, because I know we talked about this a little bit and we can go into it more. When I went to my mission and purpose weekend, I liked the job that I was doing, but I knew that it was really bad for me. And I also knew that there was another job out for me that I loved doing that I wasn't pursuing, that I chose to, you know what? I can pursue this position, and that was radio. I did radio from 98 to 2004, and then part-time till 2006 and 2007 and 8 a couple times. And then a while back in 2011, I was auditioning for Way FM, and then I was doing a pilot for Christian hip hop on a internet web-based radio station for a couple months. And then I decided after Mission and Purpose, I was going to put together some material that I had from way back in the day and just submit it out to all the old radio stations and stuff that I connected with. And no kidding, a man I used to work with saw my name and resume, called me up and like, come in for an interview. I'm like, all right, cool. Came down and pulls me into his office, and he looks me dead in the eye and goes, is this what you really want to do? If I'd been a full-time night DJ on a Denver local radio station, I had a reputation, and we'll go into the name part a bit because we can laugh about it now. He just looked at me and says, you know what this job is. It was the bottom gig. I'm like, Rich, you know that if I do this, it gets my foot in the door, so then I can pursue what I want to do. And he's like, cool, you're hired. It's minimum wage. Let's go. And I'm like, all right. So
I'm going to wind back to your early radio days.
Yeah.
And tell me if I'm wrong. The story is like you are the guy with the booth at the bar or the restaurant or the ball game or whatever. And the radio is jamming, and that's Rob doing the like live DJ thing.
Yeah.
What was your name? You weren't going by Rob at the time, right?
I was definitely not going by Rob. I'll tell the story like this. I worked for a radio station called Alice 105.9 way back in the late 90s, early 2000s as an intern for the first part when I came back from my first divorce. And interning was a great way for me to like just get out and go to bar nights. They actually needed somebody over 21 to hang banners, and I was poor at the time, so I got to hang banners and then drink for free and then hang out at a bar with a whole bunch of radio people. How cool is that? But the morning show guy here was a gentleman that refused to call me by my first name. And we'd do these big events that were very inappropriate events, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but they were popping balloons on this major stage, and he would call me Rick, Roger, Randy. And one night he called me to the stage and said, Russell the Love Muscle, get over here. And I was Russell the Love Muscle from 1998. So as an intern, I was Russell. They had always called me Russell. And then when I got on air, I had program directors that had led me to like, hey, lean into the love muscle. Our target demo is women of 18 to 50. Like, that's how it works. Be silly, be goofy, be the love muscle. Then I had other guys that were like, we don't want you to bring that up too much. You're just Russell. And then when you're out at bar nights or you're doing your live DJ gigs, then lean into it because it's the late night stuff. And I was the night guy from 7 to midnight here in Denver, and it was a lot of fun. It was way before, for the younger audience, radio was a big deal back in the day. It was a lot of fun. For a long time, I was Russell the Love Muscle.
I mean, I'm just thinking back as a call back to like having an identity.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And a young man coming out and being thrown into, what I would call the scene.
Yeah.
Here's Russell the Love Muscle. He's in the scene. He's doing the things at some point, right? Because you go to your weekend at 2018, and we don't have to go into the details, but something happened to Russell the Love Muscle, right? It wasn't sustainable, or it got too much, or whatever happens. This is really where I'm interested is that something happens. If Russell the Love Muscle is on one end of the spectrum and you come out of the weekend as a man who's now resubmitting himself, wanting to go back into radio, what's the new Russell the Love Muscle, or what's the new name?
I think, and one thing we should identify here is Russell was not a believer in Christ either. My journey going after Christ didn't start until 2006 after my father had passed.
Well, I don't think we would surprise anybody to say Russell the Love Muscle was not a
not a
believer,
believer.
but your father
Right.
passes. And so what happens
Yeah.
to Russell?
Russell starts to fade away in the background. And when I go into Mission of Purpose and I meet with an old buddy and I start that low paying position as a board op and then move up into commercial production and then radio production. And then I'm sending tapes to the radio station in the cluster they work at saying, listen, if you're looking for a part-time guy, I can do this and I can do that. A local radio station here called 99.5 The Mountain, which plays a lot of classic rock. And I hate calling it classic rock, by the way, because it's like Metallica and Nirvana and Blink-182. It's not classic rock. The old guy in me is getting upset.
All right. I was just listening to the oldies station,
Yeah.
right, which now plays 80s music.
Yeah.
But I was like, wait, what happened to the oldies? But I was like, no, in the 80s, when I was listening to oldies, it was 40 years ago, and the 80s are now 40 years ago. My gray hair means that I am old, and the oldies station is now my childhood.
Right.
Sorry, so classic rock.
So classic rock radio station. The gal that hired me was Sam Hill here at the Mountain. She was great, and we sit down, and she knew me as Russell. I had a really good reputation. There was a lot of people in the station that had known me, that I'd worked with before, had been in the Denver local market, so I was pretty well known. And she pulls me in her office. She wants to hire me on part-time and says, listen, we don't do the love muscle stuff. That's not even the thing. And I said, honestly, I'd like to use my first name, Robb. I'd like to go by my first name. And I had spent some time looking through my friends list, trying to find a last name that I felt wasn't as difficult as my last name that we said earlier, Paolasso. It doesn't feel like a radio name. And I just said, I landed on Hart, H-A-R-T. I had a buddy, Jared Hart, who's the Crucible man. I'm going to steal his last name and use that. And Sam had said something that was profound, and I didn't even think about it at the time, is, wow, Russell the Love Muscle has grown up and matured into Robb Hart. Like I was using the heart and the love muscle moniker still at the same time, with that I didn't even realize it at the time. To be able to express that maturity and that difference and that change, if I were to do one of those Instagram videos for the Crucible Project, I'd say, hey, going into my initial weekend, I was still Russell the Love Muscle, but coming out, I became Robb Hart.
Wow. All right. So I might have quickly diverted, but I'm really curious and interested into the Russell the Love Muscle is not a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Russell the Love Muscle and Robb's father passes away. And somewhere there is a connection in there into becoming a believer, into going to church. So I just had this discussion with, ended up being a pastor who's kind of like, well, once you have Jesus, that's what you need. I wouldn't argue with that. Christ is the thing that changes. And yet I was a good Christian, somehow missing Christ in a lot of ways. And so the weekend helped open up space in me. Maybe it might be the best language that I had, but what was going on in between there that kind of got you to that place?
It's a lot of self-reflection, a lot of looking back at Russell, like the guy that I used to identify as. It was really easy for me in those young 23, 27-year-old days to hide behind. I think this is why I love radio so much, is I can pretend to be somebody else on a microphone. You don't know what I look like. If you saw me in the street, you wouldn't know. That was really easy to hide behind that persona. Going in to the Crucible work in general made me realize, and just finding Christ, I wanted to be the same person behind the mic, at church, at the store, in my marriage, with you in the podcast. I want to be consistently myself no matter what I'm doing. And it was that self-reflection of, I was hiding behind the mask of Russell. That wasn't who I really was. Who do I really want to be? And there was a lot of self-discovery of like, I was a peacemaker. I'm a people pleaser. I'm going to do what I think those people need from me or want from me. Hence the reason why I was part of 2 failed marriages, because I was trying to do what I thought they wanted. Honestly, I didn't even ask them what they wanted. I just assumed what I was doing was what they wanted. Turns out I was wrong. Instead, now I've learned the tools of like, okay, I've got to have this conversation. There was a good word that we used in my coaching call, is like, what is your preference? My wife is an introvert and I'm a very extroverted person. I have a son who's 29, recently had a birthday party, turned 29. And we also had a graduation party way back then with his brother and sister, graduated from high school. And this was going to be this huge party and this huge gathering with my ex-wife, his mom, and his stepdad. And we all get along amazingly well. my mistake, because I went into this party assuming that my wife's preference was that I do not leave her side because she's an introvert and she doesn't want to intermingle with anybody else. And I didn't ask her what her preference was. And then I felt that I wasn't being myself, because you know what I wanted to do? I wanted to go play spike ball with the kids and toss the bag around and be goofy with my son and talk to his wife and interact with my ex-wife and her husband and everyone else. I'm a super social butterfly. I wanted to get up and do those things. But I felt like I would just sit there and be with her because that's what she wanted. And if I would have asked her beforehand, like, what's your preference in this situation, I would have learned that we could have found a nice balance if I would have stated what my needs were for that time and talked about what her needs were. And it was a mistake I had recently discovered, like something we will start doing going forward. Anytime we go into like a social situation where I know I need to be a social butterfly for a little bit, give me 20, 15 minutes of that and I'll come back to be with you. Then I will feel your needs and you'll feel mine, and maybe we can meet in the middle. Or if it's one of those days where she's like, I'm feeling like I need you here the entire time, then I can be there with her the entire time, knowing that that's what her preference is and that's what my expectation as a husband is.
Right. And it's, what I'm hearing there is like, what a helpful tool. I'm like reaching for a tool. And before the Crucible Project, I'd always come out with a hammer. And so everything looks like a nail. Yeah. I'm curious with the relationship with your ex-wife. Your son, is it one child from previous marriage?
Yeah. I just have one child with my, call her high school sweetheart. We had got married way too early and had a child way too early, but we have learned to co-parent really well together. That's kind of a fun story in itself. We had Marcus young age, love him to death, split family, and then he went off into the military right after high school, and he's recently returned. Fun fact, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I will be a grandpa in September.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
Exciting news, right?
Very exciting. Wow.
So
grandpa.
I'm super excited for that. I'm even more excited about the idea of I get to be a grandpa and I get to share that experience with, my ex-wife still. And I have a hard time calling her ex-wife because we've been friends since we were teenagers. And we have a really, really good relationship, to so much so that, she can call me up and know that something's up or something's wrong. And we can have really open and good conversation. We get along really well. I celebrate her kids that she's had with her husband. I call them Irish triplets. She does have twins and then another one that's a year behind. And I claim them as my kids too. We celebrate Christmas together and things like that. I don't know about you, but for me, when I went on my initial weekend, I instantly thought of a man that I felt needed this weekend as well. And that man was actually Marcus's stepdad. It took me a while to convince him. I had talked to him about the work and the benefits, and I was actually still even going through the process of staffing and things like that.
I was going to say, how was your relationship with him?
Yeah, him and I, we got along fine. There's no like negativity. I mean, early on, him and I really, we didn't hit it off, so we didn't have open communication. But he's a football fan. I'm a football fan, so we can have that surface level football talk, right? But we didn't have like a good relationship. And anytime I ever wanted to connect with his kids, I'm talking to his wife, But I decided, like, I had this pull to get him on a weekend. I kept inviting him to graduations or events to come to. And then finally at one point he came to a graduation, and like every man that was telling their story up at the graduation and talked about their weekend, he was like, I connected with every single man, but he was afraid to go on the weekend.
Can I just ask, what was the teeter-totter, right? What gets it over the hump?
It was more, if you find a weekend that fits for you and you think it's good to go, I will support you in it financially to get you to go. And I say that cautiously in the sense that, I wanted to give him that gift because there was a lot of times early on in the relationship that he was supporting my son in times that I couldn't financially support him. I just really wanted to give him this gift. And it was more of like an olive branch. I don't know if that's the right term to say, listen, you've done so much for me. Let me offer this up to you because I think this work is really good. And I think if he doesn't connect with the weekend, he doesn't connect with the weekend. But my judgment is he connected with the weekend. He was in a group for a bit. I could tell you he's not connected with the work right now. That's on his own choice. But there was a time when I was actually part of a team. I was apprentice teaching in one of those formations groups, is what they used to call it way back in the day before you and I did a group together.
Okay. Yep.
And he was in this group, and there was a process that I was leading in this teach piece. And I asked if there was anybody that had an issue that they had to bring up with anybody in the group. And Ben is his name, said, well, I do. I'm like, all right, cool. Who's the man in the group, pointing at all the circles? And he was like, well, it's with you. And so I'm sure you can guess the process. So I handed the paperwork over to the leader. And at that point, or after doing that process, Ben had said to me, we are now full circle. We've done coffee together. We've hung out. And instead of talking football, I'm like, hey, man, I'd love to steal your son or your kids for this weekend or whatever. Hey, if Jess isn't available, I'd love to do that with you. There was a time in my wife and I's marriage when I said, listen, I don't think we're going to do this unless we have people that support us or mentors. And I reached out to Ben and Jess, my ex-wife and her husband, and said, hey, will you guys support us? Like, will you call us accountable? Will you do dinners with us? Will you connect? And there was 3 couples we reached out to. Two out of the 3 said, we're with you. And we've been meeting with them ever since. So it's been amazing. Legitimately, my ex-wife's kids text my now wife more often than I've ever had conversations with them. They get along so well with her. It's like I'm almost jealous
Awesome.
now, and it's an amazing, beautiful, awesome, full circle relationship where we can all hang out as one beautiful, awkward family.
Yeah, and just my own stories, my own anecdotes and experiences with the pain that can be associated with exes, with blended families, with all of that situation, that this work can bring 2 men to a place, right? Where they can go through a process where they can be like, here's this about me. I can see where this is a story I'm making up about you, and to own our own stuff. Man, that is huge. The thing that came up on this last weekend I staffed, with all the texting and all the Instagram and all the news, we're able to see more tragedy. We're able to see more suffering. We're able to see more hard things. And that can drive clicks, can drive money, drive revenue and ad numbers. And this quote that came to me, that if we do not transform our pain, we will transmit it.
Yeah.
And we get so much pain in, and it is so easy to transmit now, that I really hear that story of transform. And that is that gives me hope.
I think I even carry this into the workforce, because a lot of times we have I work a lot with sales, and there's always there's always miscommunication with sales, with what their desires are, what their needs are. And so 9 times out of 10, a lot of people within my team are like, well, we're just going to cancel that and be passive aggressive in my judgment and say, let's just do this and tell them no, they can't have that. And 9 times out of 10, it's like, I bet you money, if you just have a quick 5 to 10 minute phone call with them and say, what are your needs here? You might be able to translate what they have posted or emailed to you and go, oh, we can do that, or oh, we cannot do that. Maybe you need to reach out to this team. And I feel like there's a lot with social media, Twitters and Instagrams and stuff. You're getting that surface level picture, however many words you can only post in there. You're just getting the headline. You're not getting the full heart of the story.
Well, and to hear that coming from the people pleaser, that's a testimony right there of no, let's reach out. This might be uncomfortable, but if we do this, that is growth. Man, I don't know if there's a better definition than to go against the tendency that you've noticed in yourself, and now to see that as a strength and be leading other people into it as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, see, when my son left for the military right out of high school, I felt we had a pretty good relationship, but there was a tug that I had, that there was some sort of separation that him and I had. And I got to be honest, I don't know how to be a father. And I've had 2 fathers in my life. One passed away when I was really young, and another one when I was an adult, but I'm struggling with the idea of how to be a father at this age. And so my son was in transition of moving his wife back to Colorado before he went to Korea for a couple years. And I, through one of the processes on staffing a weekend with another younger man that was in the military, gave me this tug to go, you've been withholding or drawing from having a deep, hard conversation with your son. There's this opportunity on the weekend. I'm road tripping with him from Washington State to Colorado. Another road trip, by the way. Oh my gosh, here we go again. Ask the hard question. And I asked the hard questions, and I got the hard answers, which it hurt, but we were able to have a decent conversation. And then because of that taking place, there was things going on in his life in Korea that he felt comfortable reaching out to me then. And then we built up this relationship where we'd play video games on Friday night for me, Saturday morning for him. And there'd be days where there was super great connection, where I'd talk and figure out what's going on in the days. And there's other days where he was just not himself, but his dad was still present. He got injured, he got demoted, and he was sent home. And he did not feel like himself coming home. I would equate it to when I got fired from radio and sent packing. This is what I felt like I was meant to do. Go away, and then I had to rediscover who I am as a person. and hating everything and wishing that somebody just sat there with me for a moment, and I didn't have that. And so I felt like maybe because I didn't have that, I should offer that up to my son. So when he came back, I asked him, I said, do you want to do lunch on Wednesday? And he took up the offer. And long story short, we've been doing lunch on Wednesday since he's returned from the military. And other than the time I was in the hospital, doctor's appointments and other things, we've missed some lunches, but every Wednesday we meet up for lunch. Sometimes we have difficult conversations. These are times where he shares ultrasound pictures. These are times he shares, these are times I'll meet up with him and move a couch into his house because, to help him out. So it's been a really amazing experience for me. And I think I wouldn't have learned how to connect with another man on this level if I didn't have other men around me showing me how they do that with their adult children or other men within the group.
I'm curious, an invitation, talking about being a father, showing up for your son, who's a little bit older now, it sounds like, than Russell the love muscle.
Oh, yeah.
What does Robb Hart show up now with the experience he has and to be a father and to speak in where the things you see in his heart that would encourage him? What do you say to Russell the love muscle to love, to support him, and to encourage him to go to a weekend?
I've been trying to convince my son to go. Right now, he's not at a place in his life to where he feels that it's important for him to go.
Yeah,
he is
not his time, right?
It's not his time. For me, what I've learned, Russell would have been an attaboy, don't challenge you.
Yeah, just the yes men.
Yes man, yes, exactly. I would have been the yes man to whatever he's doing. Right now, Robb Hart, or his father, sits back, validates his feelings. Anytime he brings up any of the, what you did, I didn't like this in your life. There's been a few of these times where like, oh, do you remember the time? And, honestly, there's a lot of times I don't remember, but I'm not going to tell him, no, that didn't happen. That's your memory of it. I'm going to accept that I've done something wrong there. Can't change what I've done, apologize for it, but can we move forward? And what do you need from me now as a father in this position? And I could tell you, he had even said, there was one Wednesday, are you open to a difficult conversation? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. One of these Wednesdays, it's like, cool. And then he sat me down and says, listen, this is going to be my son. So there's not going to be any forced hugs. Don't correct him if he calls you grandpa or pop or whatever he calls you. And you may not get babysitting rights, you may not have this or that. I'm like, this is your son. I will respect your wishes. Because it was so hard for him to bring up, there's some stuff in his past that had triggered him to want to have these boundaries set on his son. And the crazy piece for him is I'm not the only one getting that conversation. His mom and his stepdad are getting the conversation. His wife's, she's got also 2 sets of parents, which seems to be the norm. So everybody's getting this conversation. And I think because I'm validating his feelings and letting him know, like, hey, I agree with these standards and I'm willing to follow them because I'd like to have this grandchild in my life. And if I fall out of line, let me know when I do. And we can have that conversation as well.
That sounds like an honorable man who's not a yes man, right? Having boundaries is not, I don't think it's easy in general, and it's more difficult for some, for others. I saw this in just some silly throwaway place, but I will say it shows up in my life over and over as a piercing that a boundary is a place where I can love you and me at the same time. That seems like such a good way to look at a boundary. So as we wrap up our time here, I think I have a sense of who Robb Hart is, and I'm curious if you could speak for your grandson, right? This is like coming into the world, and this will be part of the digital landscape that he could come back and listen to someday. What sort of grandfather do you want to be, and what are your hopes?
I'd love to answer your question this way, because when Marcus asked the difficult question, I followed up with I respect your wishes, I'm going to do that. But I also said, I know I was not the perfect father, and I'm still working to be a better father, but I will be the best grandpa your child will ever know. And I'm going to try to do this without sparking up tears. But what Marcus's response is, I know that you will be. And so to encourage my grandson, I'm not going to be perfect. We're all imperfect humans, but I do love, my son. I love the people around me. And if you ever listen to any of my radio broadcasts, I always try to finish with a love you later, bye. And I say that because no matter who you are, you deserve to be loved and cared for. And I feel that way for, my grandson and my son and everyone else that's in my life.
That sounds like Hart, H-A-R-T and H-E-A-R-T. I love that. Yeah. So anything else you want to say to the Crucible Podcast listeners?
Go to Initial Weekend. Obviously, check it out. Be brave, be bold, be courageous. Go in with an open mind, but also be prepared to know that that's just the beginning. The journey continues. There are second level weekends. There are groups of men that are going to experience this weekend with you, and be prepared to link arms with those other men and do this work.
Robb Paolasso, thank you so much for your time. Loved meeting Russell. Loved meeting Robb. Thank you so much, and for all the ways you have encouraged me.
No problem, Jay. Thanks so much.
All right. Love you and farewell.
Love you later. Bye.
For more information about our weekends, please go to thecrucibleproject.org. Or if you're ready to get started on your transformational journey right now, you can connect with one of our Crucible certified coaches for a free 30-minute session at thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. That's thecrucibleproject.org/coaching. If you like what you heard, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rate and review wherever you are listening, and don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening.